You are listening to part 2 of the great Sonia Gupta episode. So if you didn't listen to part 1, I suggest that you go back and check that out. And let's hit it. This is all I'm going to say about Twitter. Just kidding. I'll probably say a million other things about Twitter. But yeah, god damn it. Every goddamn thing is totally poisoned by white supremacy.
Yeah.
Like everything, man. So annoying. What am I going to do, Sonia? Help me.
I wish I knew an answer. I don't know that. I think anybody who claims to know how to fix it is probably like grasping at straws. We are collectively as a culture dealing with this in a way that we didn't deal with it before. So what I think was the byproduct of the civil rights era was a lot of policy change, right? A lot of legislation and policy. And so you have things that have been changed in the books, but you haven't changed ideology. And if you don't change ideology and all you have is words on paper, it doesn't mean shit. Mm-hmm. And I saw that practicing in the criminal justice system was that we had laws that were applied unequally, right? So people that were incarcerated for offenses that white people would not be incarcerated for. Like that's white supremacy, right? That's systemic. Yeah. That's systemic oppression. That's institutionalized. So you can change the laws all you want. You can have a civil rights act, right? That says, oh, we're all equal now. But if human minds don't believe that to be true, then no amount of changing words on paper and in the law books actually makes a difference. I learned that. That was like a thing that broke me as a lawyer. I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? I am just like part of this system built by white people that pretends to believe in equality but doesn't actually practice that. So that's not where change happens. Change happens here, and change happens. And when I'm saying here, I'm pointing to my head for everybody who can't see what I'm talking about. But the change of the head happens when we speak to the heart. Like humans are so fucking emotional. Like we don't want to admit that, right? We all, especially in tech, like everybody's like, we're so logical. We make these logical algorithms and we solve logical problems. Yeah. That's bullshit. No, like we're all governed by emotions so much more than we're willing to admit. That's probably a thing we need to come to terms with as a species. But the beautiful part of that is that can drive the decisions we make and the way that we treat other people. And so speaking in an authentic way and speaking from a place of emotion is incredibly powerful. It's not like something I set out to do. It's something I just was born to do. And that's my rhetoric, right? It's not rhetoric for the sake of being rhetoric. That's like who I am. And so coming to that place of convincing people on an emotional level, right? Like, fuck the laws. The laws are not saving us. We have to convince people on an emotional level to actually see each other as fellow human beings and part of a human family.
There is a film that people may have seen. It was called Dear White People. I think it's Justin Simeon. That's his name. He's the homie, yo. So I loved that film. And then now there's a show on Netflix, Dear White People. But I don't know if people know, Justin wrote a book called Dear White People. And it is amazing. Like, I love it. I recommend it to people. And today I gave it to someone who like basically like insulted me with like some low level like microaggression shit about my hair. And, you know, like it was a very uncomfortable conversation. And I was like, you need to read this book. And I gave it to her. And she's reading it. And today she came in and she said to me, she was like, that book is so wonderful. She's like, and she covered her face with her hands and she was like, I've done it. I've done the worst things you can do as a white person. Like, I didn't know, you know what I mean? And she's like, and like, or like touching, because she's like, touch my fucking hair and shit, right? And like, she didn't, and then she said to me, she said, no wonder she like got upset. All of a sudden her eyes are open to something. And so it's like this idea of like art being able to like help transform people's lives and build that empathy. Mm-hmm. And so that is where I get to with the Sorry to Bother You piece, with like Boots Riley's piece, because I do feel like that, I think that film has a lot of power but I'm concerned about it being like misinterpreted.
I definitely think it was. My experience of watching it was in a theater full of white people in Denver. And they were laughing at all of the wrong moments and not laughing at the right ones, in my perception. Like, in my state of, like, unpacking all of these things. And that was just a thing that I noticed and was disappointed when I walked out. It was like, I felt like there were a lot of people who didn't understand the point.
So I saw it I saw it twice. And we talked about it a little bit last episode, but I saw it in a theater with mostly black people, including my dad. He was like 85, and he was like, what the fuck is this? Could you just try to imagine being like an old black man trying to watch that movie? He was like, what is this? That was one of my favorite parts about it. However, I did have a different experience watching it here in my neighborhood, which is a very white neighborhood, except that we're bordered by so many diverse communities that when you go to the movies here, shit is like normal in there, especially if you're going to like a black movie. So it was good. So, and then I also saw it with like basically an all-white crowd as well. So I did have that, and I will tell you, your shit haunted me, Sonia, because I saw your fucking tweet about it. You were like, these white people are laughing at all the wrong moments. And Ken and I were sitting in there, and I looked around, and I was like, so many white people, what's happening? Like, and I got nervous. I was like, what if they, that's what I thought. I'm like, what if they laugh at the wrong parts?
Yeah, I had no expectations, but I suspected I would enjoy and find depth in the film, which I did. I walked away thinking a lot about it, and I still am like thinking about the messages in the film. But there were moments sitting in this white theater and feeling like deep discomfort. Like, and this is a weird thing for me to say because I am not black, but I'm also not white. Mm-hmm. And I see the way whiteness, I am an outsider watching the way whiteness looks at blackness, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And watching the white gaze upon black art and black excellence. And I am always more attuned to how whiteness denigrates that or how it misinterprets that. Partly because of like the work that I'm doing for myself right now to understand white supremacy, but also because of my being brown. So there were moments, like, for example, the moment where he is told to rap, right? And like he's rapping in front of that white audience. And like, I felt like I just had like a stake in my heart for him as that was happening. But I can also see that there was and this is the brilliance of the movie, right? There's like, fuck, I'm dying. Like, oh God, that's agonizing. Like, what a horrible thing. But at the same time, there's humor in it. But it felt like all the white people around me only saw the humor. They were laughing their asses off at that part. And I was fucking about to cry. So I was like, what, am I missing something here? Like, is this actually really funny? Because it wasn't fucking funny to me. I felt like deep pain. But then I was reading other reviews from black people who watched it and who also thought that part was funny.
Oh, we thought it was hilarious, right? But because of the pain, and I think Elizabeth Epps said it, you know, she was like, that's something that's like the magic of black people is that we can still laugh and we can still, you know, and still find pleasure in life, even with all of this oppression and even with all those things. And so for us, it was like, we like get the joke, right? Like, you get it.
Yeah.
I know you get it. But it was definitely a moment where, like, if you're black or even half black, you've had that moment. Like, you've had it, you've lived it, you know? And where it was just like, it was just so great. Like, to me, it was genius. Mm-hmm. Like, I was like, oh shit. I'm like, Booz Riley is a genius. Yeah. And no way James be loving him some Booz Riley. He's obsessed with him.
Yeah, it's like something that was on my mind when I watched that particular scene was knowing friends that I know who are talented black artists who I watch. This is like what I do. I watch white people interact with black people and black people interact with white people. I watched that my whole life. It's just a thing that I've become attuned to. And I've watched my black friends code switch in white environments and become the performer, right? Not be able to just be them, like their whole self. They have to like switch on performer mode because that's what white people expect.
You gotta be sassy.
Yeah.
I swear to God, the next motherfucker that calls me sassy is gonna get stabbed in the face.
Yeah.
With words. With words.
And be like, I'm not black, so I can't judge how that person feels, right? How my black friend feels in that moment. It's just an observation I'm making. Maybe it's all fucking wrong. I suspect there's probably some truth to it. This observation that I see my friends having to do that, and I see white people expecting it. And I'm not allowed to have a judgment on it.
That's so interesting, though, that you're saying that, because for me, living out here, coming from the East Coast, New York, living in Oakland, you know, all that stuff, like, I see it with the black, and I would say particularly black men. I don't really notice it as much with black females here in my, you know, or women. Sorry, Jesus Christ, I say females. I'm kind of scared to say it, but I guess I will, because I can say whatever I want. It's my show. I do feel like one of the reasons that I feel I get like, I'm like, black people are like weird here. Okay? And sometimes I feel like that. And I think what you just said is maybe part of that, where what I'm witnessing is people who are just so ingrained in this idea of having to perform. You know, to behave like a certain way. I don't even know. Like, I'm like, oh shit, I'm like kind of like a white James woman now, where I'm like, oh shit, I gotta think about this for a while now. You know, because I'm like, oh, maybe is that what it is? You know, because my husband thinks that it's more just like that you self-select to live here to a certain extent. And I guess I'm not speaking about like people who have been here, their families for, you know, several generations, or, you know, like these like black Coloradans that exist. But I guess like black people maybe, I don't know, like who move here, or like their children maybe. Like like my husband. His dad moved here because opportunity arose for him. And so then he's here and he's, you know, growing up in this very like white environment. I think I don't know, there's just something about it, and I don't know like what it is, and I haven't been able to like put my finger on it since I've lived here. And I've been here for a while. I've lived here twice basically, and I don't know what it is.
So when I was talking to you recently, a black man brought up the history of the black community in Denver and how it had become fractured. And I think about black communities where I grew up. So New Orleans did suffer a fracturing of the black community when the interstate was built through Treme, right? That was a very purposeful division of a very strong, vibrant black community with a fucking interstate right through it. And so this is a thing that happens all over the country, but there is a strength and there's like a power and like a kind of like uniformity and a uniform kind of like backing to the black community that I see in New Orleans that's different here. These are my observations as someone who's not black and who's not white, mind you, okay? So, like, I don't want to say anything stupid or shitty. These are just observations on my part. And watching and observing black communities in the South and black communities in Denver, and they are different. I haven't figured out what it is, and it goes to kind of what you're saying right now. There's a difference that I don't know yet what that is. I don't know.
I wanna like investigate that more. Let's put that on the roster. I'm serious, because I want to know like what it is, what that feeling is. And I can't say who it is because he'll get mad at me, but just like I know a person who's probably listening to this that feels like the same way, that just feels baffled by the black community here. And it's something I'm kind of interested in exploring, because we're staying here. I will not say that I'm like a Denverite. Like, I'm always like, I'm from New York. Like, I just can't. I'm not a Coloradan, right?
How long have you been here?
Like, now, this time, 4 years.
Oh, okay, that's not that long. You don't have to be a Denverite yet. You don't sound convinced.
I just don't want to. I don't know. I can't. I still feel super out of place here.
Yeah.
Like, really out of place.
Yeah.
Every day. Like, I was at, like, okay. I went to the gym, my new Fancy Pants gym, and I was taking, I took this class, and it was like a kickboxing class. And there was only one other person in it. And the teacher, like, I was like, you know, and then finally I'm like, have you ever taught this before, you know? And she was like, yeah. And then they were just like, but this is a new class. And I was like, obviously, right? And I thought they were going to cry because I said that. But I'm just like, I'm just kidding. I'm just joshing. I'm just, you know. And
yeah,
like,
people won't josh.
people do not understand my personality here, like, at all.
So have you listened to Scene on Radio's podcast, Seeing White?
Oh, I'm familiar with it. Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And they talk about racism in the Northeast and how it's different from racism in the South.
Yeah.
Do you remember that episode? And they talk about the interactions between white and black in the South. And that racism exists equally in both places.
Yeah.
That people in the Northeast like to think that racism is a Southern problem,
Yeah.
and it's fucking not, right? It's a nationwide problem, but that it manifests in different behaviors and different interactions. And I wonder if there's something specific about Denver that maybe is an outlier, like, but part of that similar trend, right? That racism manifests and the expectations of blackness and whiteness to each other in Denver are different than they would be from the Northeast and the South.
Feel.
Because I think that informs the way you deal with white supremacy in different parts of the country. And that informs the way that white people have to educate white people in different parts of the country. Which is like, fuck, it's so complicated that I'm like, there's no uniform way of deconstructing white supremacy. It's regional specific. Wow.
I'm like taking a note on that. I'm writing a book, by the way. I forgot to tell you.
Oh, amazing.
It's called The Racist Next Door.
Love it. Yeah, I've had a few of those. I'm sure I have one. Actually, I have one right now. She's awful.
Well, we all have them. I know why James has one.
Yeah.
Some old man was just like, I see. And then we laugh about it because that kind of racism is cute.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not cute, but it is. It's like we feel comfortable with that. We know what that is, right?
Yeah. It's expected to some
Right.
degree.
Yeah.
It's generation.
It's more if an old white man approaches me, my inner monologue is nothing but like, please don't say anything racist. Just
Yeah.
don't say anything racist. Like, just don't.
Welcome to my world as a public servant.
I'm sorry. I totally chewed out a very old couple in a hospital in Lafayette, Louisiana, that were talking shit about Barack Obama. And they must have been in their 80s. And like Fox News, of course, is playing on the hospital televisions because this is Lafayette, Louisiana. And I definitely went up to them and I was like, how dare you? How dare you talk about Barack Obama that way? You're racist. And I walked away.
Good for you.
It felt
Yeah.
good.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah. But they were like 80.
Yeah.
You know, what does that
doesn't matter.
really
Those people
accomplish?
still get
I'm
to
pretty
vote.
sure they didn't actually know what I
But
did
that's the key. I don't know if you heard that, but that's the thing is like those are
That's
the
true.
people
Yep.
that go to vote.
because they have the leisure to vote,
Because
right?
it is sort of funny that I sort of understand the principle that if someone's super old and is unlikely to be alive in 10 years, they're not where you're putting your labor to like change the hearts and minds. On the other hand, these old ass people are the people doing all these fucking elections, putting everybody in. And if their vote, I think your vote should count on a sliding scale for how long you have to live with the consequences of it. I think old people should get like an eighth of a vote, and 18-year-olds should get like 8/8 of a vote, and the rest of us are on like a spectrum in the middle of that. That's how I
Whoa,
feel.
that's like
But then I hang out with an 18-year-old, and I want to move the voting age up to 35, generally. So yeah,
it is tough. But the other thing though is those kids don't vote.
No. Well, because they don't see any reason to, and I kind of don't blame them, right? Look at what just happened. But it becomes a vicious cycle. It's like, oh my God, like look at how broken our election system is. But like, if you had voted, maybe it wouldn't be, right? It becomes this just stupid.
So I want to
vicious
talk
cycle.
about that if it's okay. I am convinced I'm like a crazy tinfoil hat.
No,
person
you're
now,
not.
Also.
Well, let's hear what she says first.
I think I have an idea of what you're going to say.
So my theory is that we are not having midterm elections. And I think that and I want to be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. I pray I'm wrong. I don't feel wrong, but, I hope I'm wrong. I feel like all of this talk about the elections and the fraud and this and that is all set up and designed for our elections to not happen or not be real elections. Like, I think, that just happened in Zimbabwe? Was it Zimbabwe? I feel like I can't even fucking pay attention to anything else in the world because my news is like so Trump, and like all this stuff. So I feel like I can't even I can't keep anything in my head. But that's what they said. They said this is a fake election and it's rigged and we're gonna, redo it. And I feel like that's like what all of this is like leading up to. I feel like all this is leading up to like this idea that they're gonna try to like destroy our Constitution, which I'm kind of like, but.
Have you seen this poll that, and I don't know anything about the methodology of it or anything, but it was in the Washington Post. 52% of Republicans say they would support postponing the 2020 election if Trump called for it.
Now, that's where I'm at. I think this whole thing is like pushing for like a coup, or I don't even know what it is. I mean, you're a legal mind, young lady.
It's just fascism.
But
we're in a coup.
That's what it feels like. It feels like, and I hate to say his name, but I'll say it anyway. Don't hurt me. Bill Maher. Bill Maher kept saying that. He's like, this is a slow moving coup. He said it he said it. And I feel like
Stephen Bannon said it.
That's what he's trying to do. The whole purpose of this, was to dismantle everything.
He came out and said, we are looking to dismantle the administrative state, which is right-wing slang for everything that you can picture, from public education to welfare to just everything. It's avowed amongst Trump's inner circle that they want to dismantle everything that we recognize as American society, and that his presidency is the way to get it done. That's not a crazy conspiracy theory. That's...
No, I'm right. I knew it. Fuck. All right, so...
I don't know. I'll say I don't know that I would go so far as to say I think there won't be midterms, but I do know if Trump loses his re-election bid, the well is so poisoned against all of our existing structures in this society. He and his supporters will say that the election is invalid. And the question is, will the country have the guts to refuse to accept that? And thus far, our response to every other red line that he's crossed has been that no, we don't have the guts to counter that. And so that is a very real possibility in my mind. That's how it plays out in my head.
Sonia?
I get very anxious and depressed when I go deep into that particular subject. You probably noticed I don't really talk about politics per se, right? I very rarely talk about what's happening in a governmental institutional level in this country. I talk largely about race, which is a byproduct of that, right? It's all related. Because on some level, my understanding of institutions, being a lawyer and having grown up to respect and almost deify them. So I took an oath in front of the clerk of the Louisiana Supreme Court to uphold the Constitution and to uphold the laws of the state of Louisiana, because we value our institutions so much. And I had a breaking point when I realized what's happening to our Supreme Court now. And so the institution that is meant to be the arbiter of the final arbiter of justice in the land, the one that has the last say on what is right and what is wrong, is now corrupt. It's just there, right? That's not a like, oh, maybe it will happen. It's already there. That institution has been corrupted. That has like created in me such a profound sense of panic that I think I like internally am shutting down a little bit when I think about the things that we're talking about right now, like the prospect of what's going to happen. If I think about it too far, I panic and can't be functional, actually, because I really do think it is that bad. It's so bad, like I can't actually process it. So as you guys are sitting here talking, I'm just like locked away in my head, knowing that I can't quite process that because I have such a deep state of anxiety about it because I spent my life valuing these institutions and believing that they actually worked to some degree. I knew that the criminal justice system was very broken, right? But I didn't think that, I thought that the application of the system, the way that the system was built and the way that it was functioning was broken, not that the system itself was corrupt and shattered, if that makes any sense, that distinction there. But now I think that the whole thing is rotten to the core and that it has been built this way over many years. We just didn't see it. We built our Constitution, we built our government upon the premise that we would have decent human beings in charge. And like, that's not the case. What do you do when you don't have decent human beings governing our institutions and governing our country? Like, what then? Like, nobody anticipated that. I don't know.
I mean, that circles back around to what you were saying before, that ultimately you can do all sorts of things with the letter of the law, but if people don't feel that way. I mean, I used to think it was insane that there were countries like Britain that don't have constitutions. I thought constitutions were like really important. Like you have to write down, otherwise you're prone to anything. And that's the notion behind the American Constitution, the idea that like we can set out these guidelines that no matter what happens, these make sense. But that's not true. If a country's only as good as the people in it, if everybody doesn't agree on what the culture is supposed to be and what the country's supposed to be and what general direction we should take, then it doesn't. You can write anything down. None of it means anything. It's meaningless unless everybody can get on some kind of same page about what kind of life we're trying to live together.
Yeah, what are our values? Like, who do we want to be as people, as humans? Yeah, exactly.
That's why I don't like I hate when people call them the alt-right. I hate that. That's like my pet peeve.
I just call them white supremacists.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I hate that. So I feel like these white supremacist types and conservatives, because now I'm like, well, fuck you, GOP. Yeah. You're like straight up, you're just white supremacists now to me. You're nothing. You don't give a shit about black people. And then these handful of black people that you try out on cable news makes me sick. And I hope those people can make their conscience clear somehow, some way. Right? But I also see them as victims. I do. Mm-hmm. I'm like, yo, how could you, as any self-respecting black person, be like Candace Owens? You know what I'm saying? Like, how can you talk? How can you even function like that? Yeah. As a black person?
Yeah, there's South Asians, Nikki Haley, Ajit Pai, like all of them are part of that same kind of mentality. This idea that like, do they really think like white supremacists are gonna like pat them on the head and be like, you're one of the good ones, we're gonna save you? You know, like that's not how.
No, they're coming for all of us.
Yeah.
And that, like you said, with your feeling of panic, like I feel that too. Like I think about the stuff that we talk about, you know, and the things that I say and the things I say publicly. And I do wonder, like, is someone coming to my door? Like, you know, and I listen to my NPR stories and those things, and you hear about, you know, the people getting disappeared or the activists, or like the thing in Saudi Arabia with all they're getting to drive, right? But the activists who fought for it are all still like rotting in jail right now. Like, are we going to jail for dissent? And are we willing to do that?
I think the dangerous position we are now in, that we've not been in historically, is that our police force is so profoundly militarized at this point that protest and revolution and revolt are almost not possible anymore. We've allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
Can you picture if Kent State happened today, I just feel like it would be another day. I just feel like the rhetoric would be so much whatever happened in Kent State back then, where the country collectively took a step back and went, oh my God, they killed our kids. I don't give a fuck. Our kids get killed in school every day. It's not meaningful. It's not a meaningful distinction. People would come out, and enough people on Twitter and in the media would say, well, they shouldn't have been doing X, Y, Z if they wanted to live to see tomorrow. And then there'll just be a Kent State 5 days a week. I mean, I don't know that we have the conscience as a society for any of those breaking points to matter enough. That's the thing that worries me. I don't think anyone actually gives enough of a shit. We're really hardened. Like, I can't say I wasn't around in the 60s, and I know the 60s was not a wonderful time on a lot of levels for a lot of people, but when I read stuff about that, about like how revolted people were by massacres in Vietnam, by Kent State, things like that, I can't picture our society being collectively revulsed by that stuff anymore. I just can't.
What about what happened though, like with because I feel like people definitely. Actually, nah, you're fucking right. I was gonna be like talking about the babies in the cages.
And it's still happening.
Yeah,
but nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Maybe Abu Ghraib was the last thing that there was like a collective revulsion at that I can think of in our culture.
So, and actually when you say that, this has turned into a real bummer, by the way.
Sorry.
But,
damn, we just like went down a dark path.
I know, I'm like, ugh. But the lady, Patrice, what's her last name? I can't think of her last name. I feel embarrassed when I can't say these African last names, but at the same time, I'm like, you know what? Sorry, girl, I love you. Patrice! But, like, who climbed the Statue of Liberty on the 4th of July.
Yeah.
I, like, follow her on Twitter or whatever, right? And I feel like she is still, like, she's constantly tweeting about these kids. And I feel like her shit should be blowed up. And it's not. And that's why it just made me sad when I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
And,
no,
like,
people don't care enough.
As we sit here, we are complicit, right? As we sit here talking about this, like, what is the like, what is the solution? Is it we storm all of these detention facilities, right? And some people are doing that, right? Like in Portland, there was the ICE sit-in, and then there were arrests here, even in was it in Centennial, I think?
Yeah.
At the detention facility there, and like, fuck yeah, like that's people doing the work, right? But like ultimately, what I ask myself now, how effective is that in changing the larger problem, right? They just got arrested and thrown in jail. Now they're going to have trials, like, and the problem persists. Like, how, it's almost like there has to be, like, this, like, multitude of people willing to do it all at the same time. You can just have, like, a handful of people, right? Because that's not effective. There has to be a critical mass of people.
And that's what, like, Hashim Coates was saying. Like, he was like, people don't protest in the right way. And he had some... I was like, word. I'm like, maybe we shouldn't be recording this, Hashim. But, like... changing how we do things. And that was something like, and my husband said that too. He was like, we like the first line that was crossed with Donald Trump, we should have been like when he won the election based on the Electoral College even. Like that's like when we should have had our like riot. And so we missed it.
Yeah.
And now, you're right. And then again, and that's where I'm obsessed with this idea, though, of the sorry to bother you. I'm like, oh my God, we're just like these cogs in the machine. And like, no matter what we do, like we're still participating in this. Right. And it feels like it doesn't matter.
Well, because it's not bad enough. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, that's why we're complicit in it. I mean, that's the truth, is that we read about it. And we may be deeply emotionally moved and horrified and empathetic, but we're not ready to die for it. And we don't have to die for it. And so we don't make that choice every day. And that's the kind of danger, is that, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't reach that point until it reaches that point. And by
I know,
then,
and I just feel like we keep just like pushing the line, right? Like
because storming an ICE detention facility means there's a very good chance you get a bullet in your head. And you have to be ready to do that. Like, and I mean, that's really kind of where it's at. Like, and there's so many atrocities every day that it's like you say, the shutdown. I know the shutdown. I'm feeling the shutdown feeling, like, as we're talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, how many equally atrocious things are happening right now?
It's outrage fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we combat that? Like, what can we do? What can we, like, leave our listeners with? Like, what is that? I'm looking to you. Either one of you. Because I'm really tired.
So the thing that it always, like, I get frustrated when people say this because I'm like, no, there's no time. But it's absolutely true. And this is going to sound pat, but it's, like, been a saving grace. Self-care. Like, that's the word of the day.
Yeah.
And that for me involves, like, sometimes stepping back, but also finding community so that I have a place to, like, be rageful if I need to in a way that other people understand. So I'm hoping that builds, like, connections to reach that critical mass, or, like, all of us convince ourselves somehow that we have reached that point that you're talking about, James. And because we have actually, like, we're past that point. We just, exactly what you said, we're not, like, you and I, we're all sitting around here, like, having booze and podcasting, right? We're not physically being restrained by police forces right now. We're not being detained in a detention center. We're not being actively threatened with deportation right now, right? So to realize that, I don't know. You know, this is where, like, I stop in knowing how to fix this. I know that self-care and community are huge parts of getting there. But, like, there's a big leap between, like, the conversations we're having now and the education that we impart to others and the actual, like, we put a stop to this. Like, we storm the ICE detention facility and take a bullet to the head, right? There's a huge gap there. And I don't know how to bridge that yet.
And I think what you're talking about, Rebecca, is material comfort, essentially. That the inequality of the system that we live under enables so many of us to live in such great material comfort every day that even though we know that there are people who are in literal life and death struggles every day, it is very hard to really, really identify that with that in a way where you're ready to take action. And that's sort of like an empathic disconnect that an unjust system requires.
The disconnect can be bridged by actually seeing that person as a human, right? That's empathy at its core, right? That is just knowing that there's another human being having an experience that you too could have.
Sure.
And I keep hoping that the work that we are doing builds that incremental empathy. Like, that's why part of me still says, and I will like, this is a marathon we don't see the end of, right? Is that I don't know that we get to the point where I feel exactly how that kid in a cage feels right now. So much so that I must, and I'm compelled to, like, now go to an ICE detention facility and take a bullet in the head, right? I'm not there yet. I don't know how long it takes in this process that we're doing right now, that we're engaging in, we're doing work. How long it takes to get from here to there.
But there's a hopelessness too. It's not just, the empathy gap is real, and that's a real thing. But it's also, even if you do get that, I don't know, the other thing is that you just feel hopeless. You feel helpless. You think, well, okay, what if I arrived at that moment where I was ready to do that? What action could I take that would actually be effective in accomplishing the thing that I want to see happen? And the answer is what you said earlier. It can't be 20 people. It has to be 2,000 people. But it's hard enough to, if you're talking about how hard it is to get yourself to close the empathy gap for yourself, how do you do it for 2,000 people in the same space at the same time?
Well, I guess we're all going to have to think about that a little bit going forward.
Part two won't have a funny button, maybe.
There's no funny button. But that's okay. That's okay. But I will piggyback, if you will, on what you said about self-care. And Dr. Brenda Allen, she said that to me. She said, you need to practice radical self-care. And I love that, And so for me, radical self-care, like, what is that? Like, so let's leave it with that. Like, let's think about, like, what radical self-care means for us. Like, for me, radical self-care means, like, I spend all my money on my expensive gym. Not to get thin. I spend my money there because it has, like, this amazing hot tub with a fountain. and 2 pools. And I mean, anyway, so I'm saying, like, those are some of those things, like those creature comforts, but for me, that make me able to go on, I guess. So I think that's part of it for me, is just, like, taking care of myself and taking care of my family, taking care of my boy and my husband. And part of my radical self-care is having these kinds of conversations and being able to hopefully share them. And it doesn't even matter to me how many people hear it, really, because I feel like, like, it's out there.
It's in the ether. Yeah, it's in the universe.
So that's for me. What's your radical self-care, James?
I don't know.
I'll come back to you.
I
Sonia?
see that you're trying not to end on a downer note, but I'm just like...
I'm depressed because I'm White James!
I can't picture myself kneeling in front of that kid sleeping in a cage telling him that my radical self-care is doing something for him. I just don't. That's a disconnect that I have. I can't. I mean, I get that I have a family and I have kids and I have a self, and if I make myself miserable or, go jump off a bridge or something, then that destroys those like, I get the self-care of activists thing. I get that you can't burn out. I get that. But I don't know. It's a little bit pink pussy hat to me to be like, what's the solution for those kids? You just gotta care about yourself. But I like a good, like, back rub now and again.
Yeah. You need Chinese foot massage, baby.
Yeah.
It's the cheapest massage in town. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they should be our sponsor. Anyway.
Ooh, that's actually a good idea. Some real local sponsorship.
Yeah, I'm a jam. Okay. What about you?
Well, like James, I also struggle with that idea that, well, first of all, I struggle with self-care in general. Like, I don't know what that looks like or what it means, because I wake up in the morning and I want to talk about and breathe and eat, sleep, all of these things all the time. So I don't know how to not do that. It feels like a betrayal. Like, that's the least I could do, right? Is to constantly be immersed in this and never stop thinking about it ever. So I don't know how to do self-care yet. I think about it. And so, I believe on an intellectual level that it's important. I know that, but I'm not yet good at it. Some of the things that I'm identifying that are important are, like, talking to my mom, talking to particularly my women of color friends on a regular basis, and just being like, I don't need to explain my experience to you because you already get it.
I know, it does leave you room to talk about other shit, I'll tell you that.
It does.
That's the other thing. I'm serious. That's a big deal for me. That's why the people that I surround myself with, same way, where I can just be like, white people, and we're just like,
right?
Now let's talk about something else.
It's hugely therapeutic, yeah.
Like it feels good to not have to explain it.
Exactly.
And so I'll say that. I guess you made me a little sad, James, but...
Not trying to guilt trip you about enjoying your gym membership.
You're not.
We all enjoy our creature comforts. That's not.
You're never
what I'm
gonna
saying.
stop that, because guess what? That gym is the shit.
So to kind of answer what you're saying, like, I can't kneel in front of that cage and tell that kid that my self-care is helping them. It's not.
No.
Your self-care is not directly helping the kid. The self-care is helping you help the kid.
Yeah.
Right. Sure.
It's like there's a level of removal there that's hard to like. It feels weird and crunchy and gross.
Yeah.
And it does feel indulgent. It is in fact indulgent, right? This concept of self-care and activism itself is fucking indulgent. Like, you go to like an actual poverty-stricken country and see how much activism people can actually engage in, right? Like, to some degree, this feels like kind of like wrong to say activism is a luxury.
Oh,
The ability to be an activist and to have the time, like, that's a leisure activity, right? I have the luxury to get on Twitter and, say what I say, or like went to Tornillo and for a weekend and protested there, right? Like, that's a luxury to be able to do that.
Or it's the opposite.
Right?
It's a profoundly isolated life where you give yourself no family and no,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, the concept of activism is a uniquely like modern phenomenon in some ways too, and it comes with like wealth and privilege. So
that's why I never describe myself as an activist.
yeah, I'm not super comfortable with that word.
No, but then when people say it, because that has come up before.
I prefer advocate.
Advocate. That is a good word.
Then I am, because I used to be a lawyer.
Yeah,
But I like the word advocate.
Yeah.
That to me is like, that encapsulates what is happening, really. Like, it's a higher
I
level.
always feel like when people are like, oh, I don't want to say people. I'm going to say white people, because that's what I mean.
Yeah.
When white people talk about being an activist, I'm always like, oh, like, it's like, I don't know, just something about it rubs me the wrong way. And you know that, James, like, you know that like bothers me. I'm like, yeah, great, you're an activist. Like, why do you have to tell people? Just do your shit.
Yeah.
That's pretty universal. I think, yeah. I think that's across our culture. I don't think calling yourself an activist gets a very good response from almost anybody.
Yeah. It's very like self-aggrandizing and kind of gross.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like only with white people. I don't care if people of color say they're activists.
That's a good point, actually. I think I appreciate your nuance. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
I would say I wouldn't define this as self-care, but I would say that for me, something that's been helpful has been getting more locally active, feeling like it still doesn't do anything for that kid who's living in a cage right now. And I suppose there is a nice facility right here in Centennial, so it is indeed local. But I feel like I used to just read national news every day and flip out about what the president was doing and what the Senate was doing. And like, we read big picture news and very few of us have any idea what's happening in our community at all. And I have found that being more active in my community enables me to see measurable change, feel like I've done something, and go to bed without that feeling of dread that just like, as opposed to opening up the newspaper and reading about Trump. People like Soul, H. Soul, who's doing so much with education activism right now. People like Elizabeth Epps, who is actively changing individual people's lives in the prison system on a regular basis. Those are people I'm finding very inspiring now, where instead of looking at the world in really big picture global terms that I feel totally helpless in, seeing the ways in which small amounts of time and money that are doable for people can make huge change in actual people's lives here among people that you know. That's a good answer that I can give you. That's less depressing.
I'll take it. Cause I'm feeling that way too. And I think some of that, I don't know if it's because I'm Black. I don't know if that's why, like, for me, I'm just like, I do get that feeling, but I also am like, this is nothing new. This is not something I'm not accustomed to thinking about. Like, when you say that, you're like, oh, I just want to get up and just, like, I guess I just feel like, oh, that's like my whole life. I don't even think about it. It's just like the way I do things. It's every job I've ever had. It's every art project I've ever made. It's like everything I do has been about that, since like I was a kid. And so it just feels like, because you were talking about working in the criminal justice system and your observations and the things that you see and they're just a part of you. It's like in your DNA now, right? And so I don't know. That's how I feel about it. So I also feel like, hey, like we should be able to like take breaks and like chill out, because now I'm going to be a bummer too, but I feel like that's what killed Greg Diggs. I feel like that's what killed him, was being a black man in America. That's what killed him. And, you know, the stress that we're like feeling on a daily basis. And I think that's the reason that I am like, oh shit, we do need to take care of our like physical bodies and our like mental bodies and those things. That feels really important to me because I don't want to fucking die from like a heart attack. I think about that shit all the time now. Like, I'm not even kidding you. I watched an episode of Grey's Anatomy and the black doctor, Dr. Bailey, had a fucking heart attack. And she did like a whole monologue about how black women go to the emergency room and nobody believes them what their symptoms are. And she kept saying it and saying it and saying it. And then she had a fucking heart attack. And like, I was feeling that. And I swear to you, 2 days later, I went and I joined that fucking gym because I was like, oh shit. I'm like, that's going to be me. Like, people aren't going to like believe me. That when I'm saying, oh, I feel like this, because I do feel like that. I'm like scared that I am going to die from like a heart attack.
That's a real thing. And when you say that, that does make me want to walk back some of my criticism of self-care. That's a real, you're no good to the world dead. That is for real. And so that's meaningful to not burn yourself out and to take care of yourself. That is a real thing.
Yeah. So take that, motherfuckers, if you're listening. Go, oh shit, this is where I always get in trouble. I will not call anyone bitches or motherfuckers. What say you, Sonia Gupta? Give us something to go out on.
Oh gosh, that's a lot of pressure.
Word. High blood pressure. That's a thing. Get checked.
So I am still an optimist, not necessarily about human structures, but about humans themselves. I think that we're at an inflection point in our history where our evolution isn't biological necessarily, it's psychological and emotional. And that involves seeing each other differently. And that's the thing that I'm more interested in, is that version of evolution. It sounds kind of hokey, but I really do think that that's possible. And I think that there are a lot of people that I know personally who are undergoing this evolution in themselves and learning to see other people differently than the way that they used to. So that gives me hope. On some level, because I think actually, believe it or not, there may be a requirement for a smaller number of those people than there would be for the 2,000 people that need to storm the ICE detention facility, if this makes sense. That a smaller number of those people who have made that kind of evolution can actually affect a lot of change. So I'm kind of interested in pursuing that. And part of that is why I am working to change the way that we look at each other.
Well, I'm looking at you, girl, and you are so beautiful.
Right back at you.
Thank you so much, Sonia.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
it was really wonderful.
You're amazing. All right, White James, take us home, baby.
Off Color is a presentation of Tan Tigress Productions, hosted by Rebecca Henderson, produced by me, James Meekum, music also by me. Check us out on Twitter at Off Color Pod, on Facebook at Off Color Podcast. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.